Welcome back, everybody, to the Mentality Project's Mentality Mondays Health and Masculinity Conversation Series. I'm Magnus Dallier, the Mentality Project Coordinator. We're here today with Compassion in Action for our first ever student guest podcast. I'm going to pass it off to my co-host, Chelsea Hill, and then let our guests introduce themselves as we get started today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Mentality Mondays. I'm Chelsea Hill. You see in they pronouns. I'm one of the health promotion specialists here at the Well, specializing in sexual health, sexual violence prevention, and men's engagement initiatives on campus. And as Magnus was saying, really excited to have a Compassion in Action here with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to both you, Nathan, and Rachel, to please introduce yourselves. And can you tell us why Compassion in Action was founded, the mission, and what sort of activities you both do?
Sure. I'm Rachel. I'm the president of Compassion in Action, and I helped found it. I don't know if Nathan, you want to do a little intro?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Nathan. I'm the treasurer of Compassion in Action. I'm a senior here at Tulane.
So I can kind of go into how the club was founded. So right now I'm a senior, but when I first came to Tulane in the fall 2017 semester, I was just a freshman starting out, and I was registered for Dr. Leslie Ann Sackett-Koo's Secular Compassion in Professional, Political, and Personal Landscapes colloquium course. And in this class, we explored the role of compassion in personal, professional, and global affairs. And we had guest speakers that included those across many different fields, from a police officer to a director of a homeless shelter. We even had an occupational therapist who teaches immune system building poses for her patients. And we learned a lot about meditation, and this is kind of where I got my start in meditating. And so when the course was over, a bunch of my classmates and I didn't want the course to end. So we decided to transform the class into action as a club, along with the help of Dr. Sackett-Koo as our advisor. And from taking this course and knowing the value of implementing meditation and compassion onto oneself and others, especially in addressing and suffering and stress, we were able to make this our mission for the club, Compassion in Action, which promotes these values on Tulane's campus and in the greater New Orleans community. So that's kind of where the club started. And in terms of events, I think you asked for, we've had a Buddhist monk, Sifu, who is a master teacher in mindfulness and compassion from Thailand, who was able to come as one of our first events and help found the Wounded Warriors program for soldiers in the United States. And her daughter, Dr. Jenny Tabby, was a neurologist who conducts research on how meditation improves neurological disorders. So she also came and spoke with us in my freshman year, and she actually just returned last semester and spoke with our members and gave us tips on meditation. And we have a bunch of other guest speakers planned for this coming semester. We also do meetings about gratitude journaling, meditation for beginners, mantra workshops. We've had yoga classes, stress relief meetings with coloring. And we also try to combine this self-health, self-care with community service. So in a lot of our meetings, we have different service opportunities, such as writing holiday cards for hospitalized kids, senior citizens, veterans. We've also had speakers come from different organizations in New Orleans, and they help us to give us different opportunities in how we can contribute to the community, whether that's donating to a local food bank. Second Harvest Food Bank is where we've been doing a bunch of different donations last semester when we had all the hurricanes hit. The Children's Hospital of New Orleans, we've done some volunteering with them, 504 Yoga for Youth, and Project Peaceful Warriors, who's also going to come this semester and do a mindfulness workshop with us. So that's kind of a mouthful, but that's what we're about. And next week, actually today, is Random Acts of Kindness Day, and this whole week is, and we're celebrating it next week. So you guys can find us on McAllister. We're gonna be passing out notes with positive affirmations, some snacks, COVID safe, prepackaged. And there's gonna be an opportunity to write thank you notes to Tulane faculty and staff, such as Sodexo workers. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's a lot of really admirable work. It's very impressive that y'all are doing so much more than I was even aware of. That's It's fantastic. So I wanted to ask why you think Tulane students should be getting involved in compassionate action as an organization, and why they might want to consider mindfulness and these sorts of practices as well.
I jump in and say, college can be a very stressful environment for a lot of people. A lot of deadlines, a lot of work. We're all, trying to get by and make sure that we're doing our best. And these sorts of, and changing your relationship with mindfulness and making sure that you have a skill set to deal with anxiety and to deal with stress is really important in my experience for getting through college. And also, I think it's a great community of people who both want to see kindness enacted in their daily lives and make a difference in their communities. I think it's a great place to meet important people and to make your college experience a little bit easier, or give you the tools to do that. And then to hopefully see a little bit of positive change in the New Orleans community.
How about why should we incorporate mindfulness and other sorts of meditation practices? How would you, to another Tulane student that may be watching this, how would you advocate or really like sell that to a student?
I can take this one. I think that you were asking about implementing like mindfulness practices like in our club, like how can that help us like be better students, people in our communities. I think that you can't help others without helping yourself first, without focusing on your own well-being, whether that be with meditation, gratitude journaling, doing things for yourself. Like in our club specifically, we're an all-inclusive place for students to learn about and practice mindfulness. And we try to implement these values to better our surrounding community. And I think that it really shows when you're able to focus on yourself first, and it helps you so much more to be able to help others in your own community.
Well, great. I'm sold. I think that's absolutely true. You can't give from an empty cup if your cup's not full. And so that, yeah, great response to that. So speaking of, because we're in a pandemic, as you guys know, and just we're wondering how has COVID impacted the work that you guys do, and how has Compassion in Action navigated the limitations posed by COVID?
So we kind of, me and Nathan, I guess, can both touch on this. When COVID struck, we wanted to still stay engaged with our members, but obviously we were all at home. So what we did is we created a Linktree page, which is basically just this website where you can post a bunch of different links. And what we did was we created a bunch of different guides for our members. So while we couldn't have actual like meetings in person with each other, we couldn't do any community service, we created 3 guides. One of them was things to do while social distancing, whether that is different self-care activities, links to online meditations, different self-care guides, all within this. I can even like send you guys a link if you're interested. For social distancing, things to do with your friends while not actually being able to be in the same room as them. We also made another guide, staying informed in our communities, something huge that happened over the quarantine period. After the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, we wanted to, and me specifically, like I wanted to educate myself more on marginalized communities and share resources with other club members and for myself about racism that's going on in the US. So we created a whole guide with like TED Talks, movies, on Netflix, books, podcasts, so we can all like stay informed in our communities. And because there's no excuse not to learn more about racial injustice that's going on. So we created a guide about that, and also with COVID-19 updates for Tulane, and also for around the US, all the COVID guidelines. That's another guide we made. We also created another, it's all like a Google Doc, so everyone is able to add their own resources that they find. And a third one was about getting involved in our communities virtually. So we have a bunch of different community service opportunities you can do, such as creating cards for hospitalized kids and mailing it to them, becoming a pen pal with a senior citizen, locations of different food banks, how to locate your own food bank near you, and other different activities like that. So those are our 3 guides that we made. And we also kind of just like made it an open dialogue by creating it a Google Doc so anyone can add their own comments, thoughts to it. So that was kind of what we did there. I don't know if I said a lot. Do you have anything to add?
No, you basically had to reframe your approach. You had to do what a lot of us had to do, was scramble and think about how can we still reach folks where they are. So no,
Yeah.
great answer. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Sure. I just add, while COVID has certainly posed its challenges for reframing what we can and can't do as a club, I think it's also given us a really important opportunity because the college experience is already challenging enough, and there's already enough struggle and problems going on in the New Orleans community before COVID, and this pandemic has just added on to that. Every day we see articles about food insecurity growing in New Orleans, about the mental health side effects of this pandemic, about people struggling with economic conditions, and all of that weighs on both our student body and our community. And so I think the work that we do to help make sure that people are taking care of themselves, to try to give them the skills to better take care of themselves, and then to do what we can in a little small way to help out the community is made even more important in a time like this.
Yeah, like these past few months have been so transformative to like our country. And I think we all kind of just thought that like we couldn't just like sit back when we were like all at home. Like we wanted to find ways to keep everyone engaged and informed about their communities. So
Yeah, that's very commendable, and it sounds like you all have really adapted quite well to the COVID limitations, putting a lot out there that I think is very useful for a lot of students to get in touch with. So that brings me to wanting to ask you all more about defining compassionate action as a term for people who might be unfamiliar with it, and how that kind of drives the work that you're doing.
So I can answer this one. Also, for the record, going back to how we've adapted to COVID, all of our meetings are recorded on Zoom, and there's a Zoom option. If we do have an in-person, obviously following COVID protocols, you're more than welcome to log in via Zoom if you're not comfortable with attending in person, or if you're completely virtual. So that's just a disclaimer for anyone interested in joining the club. But yes, so compassion in action. In Dr. Sakaku's colloquium course, actually, we really delved into the meaning of compassion in all of our classes. And it's recognizing that there is a problem, whether it's social, economic, racial inequality, among many other things. Taking action to help, that is compassion in action, whether this is aiding the New Orleans community, participating in service events throughout the country. We've been doing like virtual like cards to send around the country, and addressing inadequacies within ourselves as well, not even helping the surrounding community, but like I said, like helping yourself and recognizing inadequacies within you and taking action to improve our mental health. And as well as being able to spread this action throughout the community.
I'd add too, I think a big important aspect of what we do as a club is try to look at the world and look at ourselves in a more empathetic way. And I think by doing that, that allows us to try to find ways to promote kindness and positivity into our communities, and as Rachel outlined at the beginning, so many times that often starts with checking in with yourself and making sure that you're doing well, and viewing what you're able to handle in a given week with compassion and being kind to yourself.
And I'm just wondering, from your personal perspective, you be completely honest or not honest here, but You, Rachel and Nathan, have you both, from being in Compassionate Action, have you both found more empathy within yourselves and compassion and kindness? Have you essentially have you gotten out of this club what you were hoping to get out of it, and what haven't you gotten out of this club that you're hoping you would?
So I can start off with that. That's a great question. I've gotten a lot out of this club. It's not initially what I intended when I first started the club with a bunch of my classmates. We weren't sure if it would just be members of our colloquium class joining, or if it would be like this huge campus-wide initiative like Outreach Tulane, where the whole entire campus gets together and does service events. But it kind of came to be like a little bit of a smaller organization. We have about like 20 active members who have been coming and going if they graduate, and whatnot. And I think that my perspective on being able to make a difference has kind of changed. And even just making the college experience better for one student is worthwhile. And it's been more than that. And I've had a lot of people, club members, who have really enjoyed being part of this club and feeling like they are able to make a difference. So even if it's such a small number, I feel like it's still really rewarding. And for the acts of service that we have done together, for others around our community and for ourselves, I think that we have been able to make a difference. And that's just really amazing and rewarding for me personally. And I've also improved my own mental health, and have built up skills to be able to tackle some tough situations. And I think that that wouldn't have been possible without this club. Specifically, Dr. Sakaku, if you're watching this, shout out to you for really inspiring me and a lot of other members in the club.
Yeah, I would add, I think the club has definitely been an important part of my mental health routine. I think it, for me, it encompasses a lot more than just the bi-weekly meetings that we have. I think any successful mental health routine needs to be something that's tended to frequently. But it's always a good check-in to make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing to keep myself healthy and happy. I would say I definitely, I've been primarily involved with the club this year, and the COVID restrictions has made it difficult to do some of the more service-based opportunities that I'd love to see us do. And so that's definitely something that I hope in the coming weeks and the coming years, as the club grows, that we'll be able to have more of an impact in.
So would you tell us a little bit more about what masculinity looks like in Compassionate Action and in your experience as a Tulane student?
I can start with that. I think, so much of gender roles influences so much in our society, and that obviously seeps over to what happens at Tulane. I think, it doesn't take long in your experience at Tulane to notice that there's drastic gender differences in what classes people take and in what activities they pursue in their attitudes towards certain behaviors in the Tulane social circles. And so I would guess, in the club, we're a strongly predominantly female-based club, but I would say to the men that do show up, that we try to add to masculinity what is so frequently missing in our societal representations of it, making sure that you're checking in on yourself, taking seriously your own emotions and feelings, and making sure that you can both internalize that and then be comfortable outwardly showing that, and being comfortable outwardly showing both kindness and positive emotions to the people around you.
Mm-hmm. And to add on to what Nathan's saying, to give some numbers to this, let's just say we did have like maybe 20 members per semester who are like active in the club. Like 1 or 2 of them are typically male. Right now, Nathan, I believe, is the only person who identifies as male in the club at this moment. But in the past, like I've been with this club since it started, and we haven't really had a lot of males join our club. And also, like a lot of my classes that I've taken at Tulane regarding sociology, sex and gender, like I said, my secular compassion colloquium course, they tend to be all, if not one or two males in the class, but all female. And it's just interesting how that clubs that kind of focus on like self-care and a self-care and like self-health, those are mainly where women gravitate towards. So I don't know, it's just interesting to see because everyone needs self-care. Everyone, like meditation helps everyone, not just females. So it's interesting to see that dynamic in how our club and a lot of Tulane courses that focus on self-care are female dominated.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that y'all are drawing attention to there, that there's kind of this gender disparity in some of these fields that seem to be more about connection and about interpersonal relationships and just self-awareness. And I think it would be a good thing to expand that for more people to access than just primarily female identifying people. So it's terrific. So,
And
I'm sorry, Chelsea, go ahead.
no, you basically said what I was going to say.
Especially just because adding on to that, what y'all have been talking about so much with the work that you're doing seems like something that so many people would benefit from, both on the receiving end and on the contributing end. And so I think just more people being able to get some sort of access point to this and start to connect with it would be really valuable. So I was also going to ask, why do you think this is, we've kind of touched on this already, but why do you think it's an important topic for Tulane students to explore? Not just the compassion side, but why is masculinity an important topic for Tulane students to explore?
Well, I think that I was even in preparation for this, I even texted one of my like best friends who identifies as male, and he was kind of talking to me about masculinity and how sometimes a masculinity complex is rigid and has like some sort of tough side to it, and meditation and self-care makes yourself vulnerable, and sometimes masculinity is not necessarily in line with making yourself vulnerable and open to finding inadequacies within yourself and acting on them and improving them. So I think it's really important for all Tulane students to be exploring this and being able to admit to themselves things that they need to fix within themselves and within others in our community too.
I would add to I think Rachel really highlights an excellent point, bringing up vulnerability. I think so often amongst men and how we traditionally define masculinity, vulnerability is seen as a weakness. And I think that, so much that you have, that in order to lead a successful life and to accomplish what you want to set out to, anything that you set out to do, if you want to accomplish it in life, really requires being vulnerable. Having meaningful connections in relationships, be it friendships or romantic, requires tremendous vulnerability. Signing up for courses that you think might be challenging for you requires tremendous vulnerability. Showing up to a job interview that you might be afraid of how you perform, or chasing career goals requires being very vulnerable. And I think those are really courageous and brave actions. And I think redefining vulnerability and how that relates to masculinity is a tremendously important goal that as a society that we're trying to rewrite and trying to undertake. And I think it certainly affects everyone here on Tulane's campus.
Absolutely. That's one word that continuously comes back, pops up, is vulnerability when we have these conversations about how unhealthy masculinity has affected our society and the tools and the things that we need to cultivate to change things. And yeah, like you said, having the courage to be vulnerable transforms the way that we live, love, show up, not only for others, but for ourselves. And so I really appreciate you bringing up that point. And that's something that we really try to encourage folks that are watching these videos is to cultivate vulnerability, because it leads to so much more than what we're dealing with now. And so going off that, we've kind of answered this, but how do you think the expectations around masculinity influence the how, I would say, Tulane operates, how students interact with each other, just how we show up at Tulane? I'm just wondering if you guys have any student perspectives or perspectives from Compassion in Action.
I think like I kind of touched on this before, but even starting with like course enrollment and seeing how these classes that focus on like gender, sociology, more like mindfulness-based classes are all female dominant. And in our club as well. And I've been a member of a few other clubs that focus on meditation, self-help, and those are also female dominated. And I think it kind of stems back to what Nathan and I both touched on, and making yourself vulnerable and putting yourself in a place where you are vulnerable is seen as weak. And I don't know exactly why that is on our campus, but I don't know, Nathan, if you can touch on that a little bit more. On our campus specifically and Compassion in Action?
Yeah, I think the way that our society conceives of gender certainly influences things like course registration. I think it influences what activities people seek out in their social life, what sort of extracurriculars students seek out. I think you can see, gender dynamics at play in a more traditional year. Anytime you go out to a party at Tulane, there's very different roles in which where their societal construction of gender influences how people behave. So I think that obviously seeps into who wants to sign up for a club like this, or what expectations they do or don't bring when they walk in the door.
Yeah, I think touching on expectations and going back to this idea of vulnerability and courage and self-care, you all bring up excellent points that, being able to be vulnerable, recognize where you're falling short, but that's okay, and being okay with that and working at it through mindfulness, through compassion, and also recognizing where other people might need some help and being in touch with that in a respectful way is a really courageous and commendable thing to be doing, and is, I think, how we should be redefining those expectations of what it means to be a man, or how someone should operate if they're masculine identified. So since we were just talking about vulnerability and conceptions of masculinity, I wanted to ask, what do you think are the biggest challenges to having these types of conversations and to making them more constructive, or having them reach people? What are the biggest challenges in these types of conversations about masculinity?
So I can start off by saying, like, I even tried to, like I said before this, I spoke with my friends and I asked him, I tried to have a conversation about this, and I said, like, why is it that you're not as interested in like joining my club versus another club that focuses on like community service or things like that I know he's interested in. And he said he's not really open to meditation. Like his friends would like think it's like funny that he's doing it and putting himself in that vulnerable place. And I just think that it definitely is a conversation that needs to be had. And I wish I had an answer for how we could make it more constructive and changing the mindset of what goes on. And I think that it takes things like this, like with you, like Magnus and Nathan, like speaking on behalf of like people who identify as male and are interested in improving themselves and their communities. And I think that it takes, like if there were, for example, like on the board of Compassion in Action, there's only one guy, but perhaps if there were 3 or 4, or if it was more of like a mix rather than being 5 girls and 1 guy, more men would see that and be more likely or inclined to join the club. And I think it's just kind of seeing it and then copying by example. So definitely increasing more conversations like this, having more, like, for example, like Nathan, you're already doing it by like being on board for our club, serving as the treasurer. And it's people like you who are going to kind of break the stigma of like this masculinity complex and promote a healthier masculinity. So.
Nathan, I was just going to ask if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think Rachel did a great job of describing that. I think, I think something that certainly that helps facilitate these conversations is being open and honest about your experience with these sorts of things. I think as a man, it's very important with my friends and with people that I have trusting and caring relationships with, to openly speak about, why I find these sorts of habits and self-care routines beneficial to me. And then, from there, it's a trickle-down effect. It's a slow growth to opening the minds and changing attitudes towards some of these things. And then hopefully that inspires somebody else to go down that path. And then, the process just grows from there.
Yeah, I think that's very well encapsulated, that this idea of, one, being honest, which is part of vulnerability, recognizing where you're at and where you want to be, but also not just individually having these conversations behind closed doors, but also publicly leading by example, as Rachel touched on. So I think that's a great path forward to destigmatizing these types of conversations and hopefully encouraging more people to participate. Chelsea, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, I'm just breaking that man box. It's real, like y'all said, it's not easy at all to have these conversations. Patriarchy, uprooting all that, it just seems to be like a reoccurring theme that we need to continue to unlearn, redefine, change in our society, transform in our society. But I appreciate the points that y'all also gave, because those are very important, at least steps to getting us there. So I want to ask, I have a couple more questions for you guys. What is one piece of advice or any messages that you have for Tulane students regarding the topics that you guys mostly focus on? Compassion, kindness, vulnerability, empathy. What are some messages that you would like Tulane students to know or to hear as you guys are also doing this work for yourselves?
I would say that there are so many resources at Tulane and in New Orleans to get started with this sort of thing. Whether it's we have a success coaching here at Tulane that works very extensively with vulnerability and health practices. We have obviously CAPS and the Well Center. We have organizations like ours. There's other clubs that practice meditation and other sorts of healthy habits. So I think it starts with knowing that there's so many exciting things on campus, and then from there trying to build your own little community that makes it easier to show up and ingrain these habits in your life, because it's always more fun showing up to these things when you know that there are people around you who are going to support you in that and put a smile on your face when you're doing it.
And I think lead by example, kind of like what Nathan is saying. If you have an idea, if you have something you're passionate about, you're interested in, if you want to make a difference in your community, don't wait for someone else to do it and for you to just like tag along. Like, do it yourself. If you have an idea related to one of the missions of our club, we are always open to taking suggestions. Feel free to join our WaveSync page. My email is on it. We have all of these resources available if you're interested in getting involved in your community on your own. Kind of, again, like what Nathan was saying, use all of the resources Tulane has available. And kind of just, if you have an idea, act on it. It's one thing to think of something great, and it's another thing to put it into action. So that is my piece of it.
Yeah, I think those are both really excellent pieces of advice to listen to. You know, this idea that there are people there for you, there are resources accessible, and to be able to actually take those, but also of taking some responsibility, taking some initiative, and doing something more than just thinking about it and talking about it. These conversations that we're having right now are excellent examples of how we can change these things, but also living it and doing it, and recognizing who's there for you and who to reach out to is always a great way to make sure you're doing well. So finally, we just want to ask before we close out today, what changes would you hope to see to masculinity programming, these types of conversations, these workshops, education around it at Tulane or in general in the future?
I think things like this that are being led by men, like Magnus, I think is great. Like as a student, like you're willing to foster these conversations and the growing awareness of this issue of masculinity at Tulane. And I also think kind of with our club in mind, like self-care practices, like promoting them, having men leading things like that would have other men inclined to take action and join in on those programming activities as well. And students specifically, like rather than staff members, I think that seeing people your own age engaging in this type of activity would definitely help.
I think collectively we're on the right track. I think, you know, there's been so much conversation over the last, 4 years since I've been here at Tulane. It seems like every year we're continuing to reckon with as a society and as a educational body here at Tulane of the different forces that influence our society in terms of gender roles, race relationships. There's so many different compounding forces that influence the way that we see each other and do or don't empathize with one another. And I think our student body is collectively very interested in those conversations. And I think any class that you show up to at Tulane or anytime you're on a social media site, there's lots of students who are very interested in having these sorts of conversations. And I think just continuing to surround ourselves with people who are interested in building a better world, continuing to show up to things with an open mind, and being willing to hear people out and to read different things or to watch different things that you're not familiar with and that can convey new ideas to you. I think those attitudes will lead us well.
Thank you so much, John. Really great conversation. I wanted to, before we end this conversation, ask how can we stay up to date with the work that you all are doing? I don't know if you guys want to plug your Instagram or Facebook, Twitter. Feel free to just give us all of the information on how we can stay in contact with you.
So we have, like I mentioned before, our Linktree page. We're constantly updating it with different resources for our members, staying involved, self-care. So that is, I wrote the link in the chat, Linktree.
I'll make sure it's also in the caption too on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so that also, our Instagram page is @CompassionInActionTU. So give us a follow, we follow back. We also have our WaveSync page. If you're interested in being added to our email list, join our WaveSync page and you're automatically added. And our WaveSync page also has information on our meetings, our event times, and any other. I think also our Instagram and Linktree are also on the WaveSync.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This was a really productive conversation. I'm really glad you guys were able to be a part of this. And thank you for being the first student organization to step up and share your insights. I look forward to hearing from the other ones. Y'all have been wonderful. We'd love to have you back again in the future. If that's something that you would be interested in, we'll be reaching out. Well, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this video. Tune in next time for more Mentality Monday Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. Bye, y'all.